All right, welcome back. We are Game 2014 in the fall 2020 semester at George Brown, and we're talking about Mobile Game Development 1, Week 12. Like we said, Part 1. I want to do a couple things this week. One of them is going to be our kind of make a custom health bar, and the other one is what I'm going to do is we're going to transition from scenes. If I can get sound in there, I'd like to get sound in there today too. Some sound effects and some simple other kinds of effects. All right, so we're sitting at week 12. It talks about scene management. Scene management means is moving from one scene to the other. You guys know how to do this, but I'm going to show you anyway. Assuming that you've forgotten or you just don't have a chance, you haven't had a chance to practice that. There is a theoretical test on platforming and some of the other things that we've talked about is going to open up tonight later on. It'll start tonight and end on Saturday at midnight. So you'll have 2 attempts, just like normal. Of course, it's open book, and you'll have some limit of time, but you'll be able to do this as we did the last one. So it's not going to be too challenging. Looking ahead, we have 2 weeks left of lecturing. So 1 week, next week is special effects, things like. Different kinds of particle effects is what I want to try and talk about, and other cameras. I'm thinking about switching off the camera we have right now, moving it to Cinemachine, which I think is a better camera, and I want to try and prune some of our assets from our project starting next week, so that by the time we get to week 14, we have a better kind of group of assets. Week 14, where it says special topics, we're going to add some screen shake. We're going to add some other things in that week. We're going to try and solidify a level or 2, make some more enemies, give them some stuff. Like there's going to be some stuff happening over the next couple weeks to kind of finish off our little platformer example. Maybe make a moving platform, those kind of things. Okay, so that's kind of stuff that's happening. So what are we doing this week? Again, just like we said, Theory Test 2 released later today, and it'll be due on Saturday. Lab 9, which is I've got a starter that's up on GitHub. On Blackboard, you can download from GitHub and start off. This is what we did last week. Plus, I added some assets that we're going to be using today. So, if you haven't had a chance to download the starter, if you don't care about the starter but you just care about the assets, you can always download the starter and start it up, and then import the assets so you don't miss anything that we're doing. It's up to you. All right, and then finally, I want to do a couple things. So a few more gameplay improvements if we have time. I want to build a health bar or some kind of progress bar, and we're going to talk about different ways of doing it. And then sound effects, if I can add some sound effects, is nice to have, but I found that I couldn't get to this because I was working on the health bar and kind of like a lives heads-up display that's kind of linked to the health bar, as well as how to switch scenes when your health goes to 0, that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's where I'm headed today. Again, the more we'll try and pack in as much as we can, but the first part that I want to tackle today is doing a health bar. How to do that. Different ways of doing this thing. And of course, one tactic is to use a slider. I'm not going to do it that way just because we're going to be different, right? And it's always good to try different things, and we learn by doing. Okay, so I'm going to go into our desktop. We're going to go into GBC, Game 2014. That's where I have my Lab 9 starter. I invite you to download the same from GitHub. One thing to note, I didn't realize, but I guess when I built Lab 8B, I actually targeted the root folder for the build, so that there's probably a larger project up on GitHub than there should be. So please just delete the you'll see it in a second. There's going to be a build. So this is going to be Lab 9B. Here it is. This is the one I'm going to work on. If you look inside there, there's Lab 8B. For whatever reason, it got kicked out here. Get rid of that, right? Because you don't care about that. That's like from last week. There's nothing in the builds folder somehow. I guess I missed it when I dragged and dropped it or whatever last week. That's fine. Okay, so let's start this off. I'm going to, oh yeah, and also let me get rid of the .git folder because I need to make a new one. Cool. And let's start off our GitHub, or sorry, Unity Hub. So I'm going to add a project. It's going to be Lab 9. I'm going to select my folder. You guys should have, you're going to be ahead of me because I'm going to import, I'm going to, again, change platforms to Android. I still need to do that. I also want to build at least once to my LD player to make sure things are working. And I did find some bugs in the last session that we have to address. Some stuff that we have to address from the last session. And we wouldn't have seen these bugs if we only had one scene. I'm seeing them when I have more than one scene. So that's something that I have to address with you and see if we can have a fix for that, because that's a bug we have to get rid of. And it has to do with the bullets. All right, so that's what's happening today. Yeah, so again, we'll try and do the health bar thing first, and then we'll take a break. Now, hopefully you guys have had a chance to do health bars with Joss, yes or no? Check mark if you've done it with Joss, and then X if you didn't. I'm not sure if you did. X, okay, so maybe you've done it somewhere else. Thank you for that feedback. So now you're going to do it with me. But you should know how to do health bars, because health bars are at least a different. My Lab 9 starter didn't have any of that in it. Maybe it's because the build, the APK, because of the git ignore file. It's a standard Unity git ignore file. Michael didn't upload the APK, so that's good. But mine did, because I'm just copying from my local drive, right? Yeah, so we're gonna run into some challenges when it comes to our starter scenes. I'm not gonna do the starter scene first. I want to focus on health bar today, because I think a lot of games nowadays use a health bar for different things. It doesn't matter whether you're doing a platformer or some other 2D game, top-down 2D game, health bar, And you guys have done health bars before for me in, I think I've asked you to do health bars for me before, but on the C++ side, and hopefully you guys will be able to do health bars here, no problem, on this side. So let's go to platformer, and we're going to change platforms. So again, we're going to go File, Build Settings, and I'm going to go to Android. Switch. So this is typical stuff that we do normally when we start the day. And the one thing I don't like when I download stuff from GitHub for Unity is that, my platforms are kind of not targeted. I've got to redo that stuff. It takes a little bit of time, especially now that I'm using IL2 CPP. By the way, if you ever want to put your game, like I talked about last week, on the Google Play Store, you need to use your compiler has to be of type IL2 CPP instead of mono. That's kind of new rules. Also notice that there's a build app bundle for Google Play. You need to set that up if you're going to put our app on the Google Play Store. All right, so that's something that we have to consider. But we're not doing that right now, so let's see if we can get this going. If we have time this semester, we'll see if we can put our little project up on Google Play. It's not going to be, it's not going to be something that's going to be beautiful, and we have to be careful what we call it, and we have to also credit, the guy who created Sunnyland the assets, because he's allowed us to use it for free. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we give him credit for all the work that he did. And on Sunnyland, what I've done this week is I've included another couple of packs from Sunnyland to give us other options for enemies and other background assets that we can use. So if I wanted to use another tile set for if I want to move from, let's say, what looks like, into the woods, maybe in another level or something, there's a couple of assets that I have here, and they're all free on the Unity Asset Store. But I've included it here in your project so we can have more options in terms of how we do stuff. So we have other assets here. One asset that we don't have, which I'm going to use, is a single pixel for our our health bar, and we can use other things too. You can use other sprites, but there's one tutorial that I was looking at a few days ago when I was looking at different ways of doing health bars, and I've done them before with sliders, I've done them before on my own and so on, different ways. But there's this one tutorial that they use a single pixel, and I was like, wow, you know what, that is a pretty good idea. It's a lightweight health bar with a very small texture. So we're going to do that today. Okay. Looks like we're finally transferred. One thing to do is when we're done this, when all the importing is done, what we need to do is go to your player settings, and I can't go there yet because I'm still importing, and I'm sure you guys are too if you've downloaded the project from scratch. We want to go to our player settings and change our settings so that way it says the right stuff. It doesn't say lab 8, it says lab 9, you know, those little things. And one day. Now again, one thing to talk about here, the reason why it's taking so long is because of the way I'm building stuff, but if I go to player settings, then this should say lab 9, and we should also see a lab 9B, not a lab 7B here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to file, save project first, and then move from our game to our simulator. And I want to go from a layout, I want to go to a landscape layout. So you should see this. Okay, this is where we were left off last time. We have our little character here. I'm going to bring him back on this side for now, but only because I want to have some peace while I'm making my my health bar. That's what I'm doing here. Okay, so that's where I'm putting him. And I'm just going to go from a landscape to a Tom's layout, which the only thing Tom's layout does not include in this case is which I like to see, is my console. I got some weird errors, and hopefully you guys can help me resolve some of them. If not a big deal. We can do it together. Okay, but here we go. All right, so yeah. So I want to make a little health bar for this little guy. So that's the project number 1. So under platformer, then, there's a couple of ways to do this. I want to make the health bar so it's generic enough that I can use it for the enemy as well. So that's kind of my my challenge for us today. Okay, so it's not just making a health bar for him only, for the little guy. I want to make a health bar for, you know, for all the enemies. The other thing is I need a little sprite that's, like I said before, that is right now we have some textures for a red bullet and a power up and bullets and all this kind of stuff. What I'd like to do is have a texture that I'm going to use for the health bar, which is going to be a single pixel. So I'm going to just make one. So I'm going to go to Fireworks. Again, you can use your favorite program to do so, or not even bother with this and just use the pixel generator or the sprite generator. I'm going to go with a 1x1. You see, I've done this before from last class. And I'm going to zoom in. Here's my single pixel. I'm literally going to just paint a box that is white, and I'm going to save it on my downloads. I'm just going to be called Pixel. Again, you can use your favorite app of choice to do this. And then what I want to do is I want to drag and drop from my downloads. I'm going to drag and drop my pixel right into here. Okay, there we go. So there's my pixel. One thing to note is it's got to be pixels per unit is going to be 1:1. All right, so please make it 1:1 pixels per unit here. Okay. Single is right, tight, center. Wrap mode is clamp for sure. No repeat. Filter mode is point, no filter, and definitely compression should be none. Why would we want compression? And then apply. So really light pixel. Can I share on Blackboard or something? Yes. Hold on a second. I'll push this out to Blackboard in a second. So you run. Okay, I'll do it now. So before we start. So assets. Okay, fine. So file, save. I'll do that. just for you, Michael, because just to make you happy. How about that? Oh, desktop. Oh, so OneDrive desktop. OneDrive desktop, right? Right? And CD game 2014 F2020 lab 9B. If I can spell properly, lab 9B. Okay, git init, git add dot, git commit -m. Well, might as well put this doing this anyway, because we need to set up a Git repository for you guys. Might as well do your Git repository now, guys, since I'm doing this for this. Git commit -m. We're going to say initial commit. Okay, and then what I want to do is up on GitHub, let's set that up. Slash George Brown new game 2014 fall 2020 and then lab 9B. Grab these last 3 lines of code, go to the command prompt and enter. And Michael is going to be on GitHub now in a second. So you can download, I mean, I guess the whole project, but you know, for 1 pixel. That's pretty funny. But literally you could use anything. You don't have to use that 1 pixel. You can use sprite generator that's built into Unity. All right, cool. So I'm going to bring up Unity Hub again and go to live this one and just refresh this so you can see that this is what we're working with today. All right, so now you should have the pixel. And if you don't, please download the project. Actually, you can probably, no pixel left behind. That's right, no pixel. All right. I want to make a, at this point, a health bar. And the way to do that would be to make, I want to make an empty object. So create empty. It's not going to be on the canvas. I want it to kind of go with the character. And remember that the enemies will also have it. So it's got to be something that's not part of the canvas. Call this health bar. The health bar is going to have a couple of layers. So my thinking is we'll have a background layer that is red. We'll have a foreground layer that is green. You can choose whatever colors you like for this, whatever makes sense for you. And we'll have a border that is black. Okay, so those are the layers. So let's do that. So we'll say we'll make a new create an empty that's in the background, and we'll add a sprite renderer. And on the sprite renderer side, we're just going to drag and drop that pixel, right? Woohoo! There's my pixel. And that pixel, let's bring it up so we can see it. And that's what that pixel looks like. Large and in charge, right? And we're going to have to change the size. So I'm going to adjust it. So before I do anything else with it, change colors and all that stuff, I'm going to go into Scale Tool, and I'm going to scale it down so it makes sense for the my character. So I did different size before, but I'm going to see 0.25 is probably right for me. And maybe size of 2. I don't know. You guys can try. Can choose if the toolbar is too big. You know, that's fine. I like to make it a big toolbar. But if you want to make it smaller and you want to make it like thinner, you can do that too. It's up to you. All right. So 2 and 0.25. There we go. And again, I'm just, you know, thinking about where it's going to be around the player's head area, where it's going to be moving around. I want to change the background color, so I'm going to change the color to red. So that's the default background, right? And we're going to call this game object background, right? I'm going to copy that, Control D, right? And by the way, background, health bars, background should be really at, if this is order and layer, if my character is order and layer at 2, right, then the background should be at least, the health bar should be at least 2 or 3. So let's start it with the same level as the character. So the The background should be something like, I don't know, let's say 3. Okay, and then this one, which is the foreground, and this one here will be the health bar itself. So we'll call this the health bar. Bear with me. I know we have health bar and health bar. You can also call it foreground if you really like to. If you don't like health bar and health bar, hell, okay, I'll just do it for you. Foreground. And we'll change this to a green color, right? Green color. And the green color will be green, green, and nothing else. So let's say really green. Awesome. And order and layer for the foreground is obviously on top of the background. So if the background is 3, then the foreground is 4. Now we only see green. But we need another little trick here to do. So I'm going to put in, again, one thing to note is these bars should definitely be reset inside the health bar. We want them to be, there's no offset in here. So we'll say reset. Oops, undo. I meant that this should be reset. And we definitely want to move the health bar up there, not this thing. Right, we'll reset that bar in a sec too. Sorry, because I moved the wrong things around, and that would be bad, right? So this would be 0 and 0. Okay, we go. All right, so now we got the foreground and the background. We got a bar. Okay, whatever, it's approximately where it's supposed to be. But what I want is for the foreground to change size. But if we did this, it would change size from both sides. I don't want that. So the trick is to put it inside of another empty object. So we're going to right click and we're add a new empty object. We're going to call this the bar itself. And the bar, the foreground is going to be inside the bar. All right. So now if we go to the bar and change this, then you can see that, well, it's kind of the same thing, right? If we change the bar, the whole thing changes size, right? We really don't want that. So, how do we proceed? How do we fix that problem? Because that's not the effect that we want. We don't want the X scale of the bar, right, which is 1, 1, 1. So here's this thing, right? So here's the position, here's the background, here's the bar, right? And the bar is going to have this foreground that is going to be added in. Now, there's some funny ways, excuse me, funny things that happen when you do it this way. I just wanted to show you this so you see it. So if I put it inside the bar by dragging it outside, like so, and the bar is inside of the health bar, right? Then when I reset this, you get this funny effect. Okay? So that's not what we want. So what if I deleted that for a second? Hear me out. And if I made a new one, so if I've said, what's the difference here if I did this? So if I go back to put this at 1, and if I went to create an empty, and then did the same thing, sprite renderer, in the sprite renderer, I want to drag and drop that pixel, right, again. And you can see that it's clear. I'm going to put this in layer 4, so it's above everything else like before. Color is going to be set to green. Here, hear me out. I know you guys are like, why is he doing this again? Hear me out, right? And then let's change the size. So the scale is going to be, like we said before, 2 and 0.25. So 2 and 0.25. And now if I change the bar to this, I get this thing again, which is not what I want. So how do I fix this problem? I don't want this to happen. That's not the effect that I want. Is it the sprite sort point? Well, let's take a look. So, because this is where this is the foreground, right? Okay. So the sort point is center. If I said pivot, right, and if I went to here and changed this, then I still have the same thing, right? Because that is the same problem, right? So there's no issues there. So this is 2, this is 1, right? And you can see clearly that that's not the effect that I want. So do I have to move the pivot? Okay, well, how do I do that? How do I move the pivot to the left? So here's the thing that I've got here. Here's my health bar, right? As an example, here's my background, and it says pixel. The foreground also pixel. Background is center. Sprite sort point center. Foreground pivot. You can change it in the sprite editor. Okay, well, let's go back to center for a second. And if I go back to this, right, and notice the pivot is center. If I go, you can also say top left or just left, right? So that's the pivot for the pixel. If I apply that. And clamp, no filter, none, blah, blah, tight. It says left this time. And if I go back to my bar, and if I do one of these, then now I get the effect that I want. Right? Okay. Nice. Nice, nice. That's what I want. So foreground, order in layer 4, order in layer 3. Everything works the way it should. Now let's do the border. So I want to copy the background. So Control D and change this to border. And then move the border just from an ordering perspective, just so it's there. I want to put the border on layer 2 and change the background color to black. I don't know, whatever dark color you want. I want to make the border bigger than the foreground. This is kind of how I did the mini map that you saw earlier, guys. So I want to go into something like 2.1 right now. Notice that the scale is all messed up, and that's kind of not what I want, right? I could move the position, which is what I want to do, back a little bit. So I could say that this position is going to move back just a touch. So let's say at minus 0.1, right, or 0.5, 0.05. There we go. So now you see that this is moved back, right? And then what I want to do is I want to the border height is something else I want to change. So I want to go like 0.30, 35, something like that. And if that's too much for you, like if that thickness, and to me it's too much, right? If that is too thick, you can definitely reduce that. So let's say try a smaller number. So it's 3.1, and this would be, you know, our scale would be, you know, 2.05. Move this back half of that, minus 0.025, and that's not terrible. It's not terrible. All right. Again, it's not perfect, but it's okay. All right, so that's just our way of doing it. Health bar, yay, health bar. Now here's the challenge with this. I'm looking at the pivot. I can go to the center. This part up here allows me to check wherever this thing is coming from the pivot or the center. Definitely want to look at centers and move things across that way. Okay. So that's where the health bar is. All right, so I want the health bar to appear above the character. Now, if I connect the health bar to the character, I'm going to have a problem, right? Because the character, what happens is when they walk around, so let's see if I run this thing now. And no, that's not what I meant to do, but okay. When the character runs around, they flip, and look at what happens to the player's scale goes to -1. That's how I've done it, right? They don't flip their texture, because that's not going to flip their connection points, right? Remember, the character also has these little gizmos. One of them checks if they're grounded, and the other one here checks if there's something, you know, kind of space ahead or whatever. These kind of things are the reasons why I can't just flip the texture the way I've done it. And this is, again, there's like a lot of other things I could have done differently here. The context doesn't matter, but the reality is, if I attach the toolbar to the character, then when I flip the character, I flip the toolbar, and that's not cool. So I'm going to make the toolbar stand alone in this case, okay? So we need a couple of pieces of script. One script, and I'm going to just make a new script here under scripts. And again, this is because of the way we did it. All right, so create new C# script. We're going to call this the health bar. And if you want to make it generic, instead of calling it health bar controller, you can call it bar controller. And reason for this is because what if I want to make a progress bar? What if I want to make a, and I want to change the colors later on? Then this will save us some time and some reworking later. All right, so we'll call it bar controller. I will take the bar controller and connect it to the health bar. And in the bar controller script, what I want, right, is for it to have two things. A connection to the bar component. So public transform bar, right? I want that. And I also want a public transform character, whatever the character that it's connected to, right? And again, if you wanted to keep it somewhat generic, you can call this, instead of character, you can call it entity. For example, if you wanted to give a crate a health bar, then you can call this whatever it is. So let's make it, instead of character, let's use entity as a generic name. Okay. So when we're out here now, we have a health bar, and the health bar has two things, the bar and the entity. So I'm going to drag and drop the bar that's inside of the health bar inside of there, which gives us control of its transform. And the entity, I'm going to make, remember, I'm going to make a prefab in a second. I don't want to do it yet because I want to make it so that there's nothing connected to this as a prefab. Okay. Next, I want to have a value, right? The value that's going to show up here so we can, for debugging purposes. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to have a public value, which is going to be of type int, let's say. So again, very generic name. On the bottom, what I want is that the public value, right, is I want to be able to set value. So public void, we're going to call this set value. We're going to pass in a new value, and what we're going to do with it is we're going to say that when I pass in the new value, then the new value divided by 100 is going to be the transform. We're going to modify the transforms, the bar local scale to that. So we're going to say that bar dot local scale, right, is equal to a new vector3 object where we're going to take the new value, but instead of, I want to track the new value. So let's put the value here. We're going to say value is equal to new value. And we're going to say take the value that we have, our value, and divide it by 100.0f. We're going to also put in the rest as 1. So we're not going to change the scale anywhere else, just this, when we set the value. Okay? We want to set up our value at start at 100. But what we're going to do is we're going to see that when we go back to this, the health bar, we're going to see a value of 100. We can just put the value in there. I'm not going to set the entity here. I want to check to see if I have a connection to an entity. If the entity is not null, right, then what I want to do is something. Let's check to see that if that's true. So if entity is not equal to null, so if I don't have an empty object, let's say, or an object is not connected, then what I want to do is this transform. So transform dot position is equal to the entity dot the entity dot position. All right, that's what I want. So this is going to happen every frame plus some value up above the entity. And my figuring is something like 0.8. A new vector3 that is like 0.8 above whatever it's going to be, right? If you really want to, you can add vector3 up, but I'm not going to do that because it's like, I mean, it makes sense instead of making a brand new vector that it's going to just do it like this. So you can say something like, I don't know, let's try vector3 up, or 3 dot up. because that's just, you know, one unit above the object. It might be too far, and if it is, we'll just reduce it. Okay, so that's what it's going to do. So it's going to hover above the object if we have a unit, an object at all. All right. May not be always out of 100. That's true. So we may want to say what the max value is. So current value and max value. Thank you for that, Michael. I think that's a great idea. So we'll say kind of like the current value and max value. Public int max value, right? And this will be the current value. So if we will refactor rename. So refactor rename current value, whatever that is. Yeah, sure. What? No. I don't like what you just did there. I'll just do it by hand. I don't know what I did, but that's okay because I can just simply copy and paste in a few places, and we're not going to do what it told me to do just now. Okay, good. So that's this. Current value and max value. Current value is 100. What's the maximum value? Maximum value we'll start by default. We'll also say is 100, but we can set it to whatever. So then it will be current value divided by max value. And we're going to get a little bit of floating point loss, but who cares? Nope. So we want to go back to this and then put the values in. So current value would be 100. Maximum value in this case will be 100. But we can change that up. We have flexibility now to make it 200 or 500 or 10 or whatever it's going to be, right? So if you wanted more health, very good, Michael. So current value, max value. Awesome. So we have a bar that's pretty good. You can change the colors on the bar. You can add an entity to the bar. You can do all kinds of stuff to the bar. Let's save this as a prefab. So we're going to go to resources, prefabs, and then drag and drop that bar in there. Okay, cool. Okay, now with this bar, this instance of the bar, I definitely want my entity to be the player. So I'm going to just drag this in here, right? So entity is the player. Let's rename the health bar to player health bar. Player health bar. Okay, and then we'll put that near the player just from a organizational perspective. All right, let's try this out and see if it actually does what it's supposed to do. Oh, that's weird. It's kind of ahead. Why is that? Well, because of what we did with the sprite. You see, what we did with the sprite when we made it is the player health bar, right? Which starts off. It doesn't matter where this is. This will just change, right? It's going to try and match the object by the left edge. Because local, what it's actually doing is taking the transform, and the pivot of the transform is the thing that's moving around. So how do we fix this problem? We could do an offset, but that's ugly. Better to do it something different. So I'm just going to unattach the player, the entity for now, so we'll redo the thing in a second. And the other way to do it, the bar itself, is instead of the object itself, so the texture, instead of the texture, the pixel being left, let's make it center again. Okay. What that produces to us, we'll apply. What that'll produce to us is a thing that looks like this, right? Which is all messed up, right? But, what we want, right, is for, let's undo. What we want is for it to work properly, this bar, the foreground actually should be shifted to the right. So let's, if the width is 2, let's shift it to the right, like 1. Okay? Let's shift this whole thing to the right 1. And then what we can do is we can shift this thing to the left 1, which kind of centers everything again. Does that make sense to you? So now what it does is the same thing. So if I do left, it still does this, right? But what in essence what I've done is I've changed some of the way that the object is being drawn. So if I go to bars 1, we need to fix the border. The border is now no longer valid the way it is because of the way we've shifted things around. So if the scale is 2.05, that's okay, but let's make it so that the border is slightly bigger, 2.1. And instead of shifting it, we won't shift it anymore. We'll make it 2.05 again. See that? Yes, and we'll make this slightly smaller, 0.305. Yeah, and I think that's good. All right, so that is this. I'm going to just share. I'm going to kind of override the bar. So I'm going to say apply all. So again, it just, in the prefab, it's still called health bar, right? But now the values have been shifted around. And if I run it, now we might see a different effect, right? Well, we should probably connect the bar. How about that? So player health bar. Notice it didn't give us an error, which is what we wanted, right? So I want to take the player health bar and connect it to the player. And let's see how that works. Right? Cool. So that works. If I jump, that jumps with us and it's connected to us. How about if I don't connect it? As an example, what happens if I remove it? The entity, does it give me an error? No, it doesn't. And that's what I wanted to make sure. So if I wanted to put a health bar on something that's not movable, or if I wanted to put it in a certain spot, or whatever, use it for some other reason, maybe a bar that's up here for a boss or something, I can do that. All right, cool. So that is the player. Let us update the player object. So apply that. He's going to have this. Cool. And what I also want for the player object is some attributes. So we have some really funky stuff happening here, where in order for us to test the health bar, because we can't really test it right now, we just know it's attached, but it doesn't really do anything. Let's pull some of this in. I've got this mess, and I want to start cleaning it up. So let's go into our player behavior and start parsing this. So this, let's up to here, is really about control. So we'll say that inside the player, we'll add in a header, call it controls. We'll put here something to do with collision detection and that, because it's jumping, moving, look ahead, you know, collision ground, ramps, and all that kind of stuff. So we'll call this platforms or platform detection. That's really what this is, right? Is jumping, and that's going to be also a header. Maybe if I can do it properly, Tom, what do you think? Talking to myself. All right, so yeah, and then down here we don't have it, but we're going to make another section here called player stats or abilities, attributes, whatever you want to call them, right? I'm going to call them abilities. And one of the abilities that the player is going to have is health, public integer health. Okay, so that's what he's going to have, or she. And I'm also going to have lives. So many lives do I have? So I have lives and health, right? And what I also want is my health bar, a reference to my health bar, right? So I'm going to say that down here, public, we'll say health bar. Actually, it's called bar, right? Now look, notice if I go health bar, I can't, that doesn't compute. But if I go bar controller, that makes sense. Bar controller, and if I say health bar, that's what I want. Okay. Let's also, just before we forget, bar controller, let's system.serialize this, just so to prevent some other potential issues. Right, so we can access it from player behavior and it won't give us an issue. All right, so cool. Bar controller, health bar. We want to get a reference to this. So there's a couple ways to do this. I'm going to drag and drop for me, because I'm going to go here and drag and drop. So notice it just reorganized some of this stuff, right? I think that's important. Someone's trying to call me when we're actually teaching. That's good. It's awesome. People still haven't learned. So So this is cool. I want to drag and drop my health bar in there to get a reference. So player health bar, cool. I want to say my player health is a certain value, 100 lives. I'm going to set to 3, all right, for now. And again, if you can also set it by default in start, which I don't think is a bad idea. So again, health is equal to 100. But the inspector always takes precedence. Lives is equal to 3, just in case you wanted to wipe away the inspector. All right, so that, or make it private. So yeah, so this is good. We have separations right now. And what I'd like to have eventually is some kind of area that I could collapse, a collapsible editor. We can, that's kind of an editor customization that we can do at some other point. All right, so that's cool. One thing to note also is if you want to see stuff that's private, you can do that by right-clicking on the inspector and looking at debug. If you look at that, you can even see all the private stuff. So for example, rigid body 2D, the sprite renderer, and the animator that I'm getting, you can actually see that for debugging purposes. So if you wanted to, a lot of this could be now made private. Okay, so normal makes all the stuff that's here. All right, so we've got our health and we got lives and we got our bar. And when we take damage, then I want to be able to reduce my bar. I want to be able to have a public, some kind of public ability to take damage. So going back to this, then I want to make a public take damage method. I'll put that at the bottom. We can reorganize this stuff too. Public, we'll call it take damage, right? And I want to kind of specify how much damage. So int damage. One person asked me earlier, well, we already have a damage taking ability in a protocol, right? Where you can have something kind of like the ability for us to take damage. Let's hold off for that for now, just to troubleshoot. So take damage, I'm going to say that whatever the damage is going to be removed from health. So health minus equals to the damage that I take, right? And then I want to modify my bar. So I want to say that my health bar, right, dot set value, so which is my new value, so which is my health. Okay. So that's what this does. So I set the health as the new value of the bar, right? And that should do what it's supposed to do, all right? Health. And I also want to do another thing that is public void. We're going to say lose life, right? Lose life. And lose life, what it's going to do is it's going to reduce my lives. So lives minus equal to 1, right? As an example. The other thing is what happens when we have to have a safeguard here. What if I take too much damage and I go below 100, right? I shouldn't be allowed to go below 100. So in my bar controller, again, this is up to you how you set this up. I'm going to set it up so that it can't go below. You may want a bar that allows you to go below where it's unclamped. But I want my value to be clamped, so it can't go below, my local scale can't go below 0. Right, so I'm going to say that if bar.localscale.x is less than 0, right, then what I want is bar.localscale is equal to 0. So that can be a new, or a vector 0. Ooh, no, I can't. Undo. Only 0 on the x-axis, sorry. This has got to be 1. So that'll be weird. Okay, so if it's less than 0, it's equal to 0. That's what that value is going to be. All right, so that's our safeguard. So this is a clamp. Clamp the local scale scale on the x-axis to be 0 minimum. Again, this is up to you. If you want to have that flexibility, you may want to say set value clamped, set value unclamped, and then where it doesn't do this. All right, so you have two different maybe methods that allow you to do that in here to have more flexibility with your bar controller somehow if you want to go negative. but I don't. So I'm going to set my value. And then what's going to happen is if my health, we're going to put this in there, if my health is less than 0, less than or equal to 0, we're going to say, then what we want is lose life. Okay, so that's kind of simple. Take damage, health less than or equal to 0, lose life. And the way we're going to take damage is if we get hit. So there's two ways we can get hit here. We have a trigger enter 2D, so a trigger collider, like a bullet. And we also have somewhere else some kind of, well, we're going to make it some kind of collider, a regular collider, right? So two different kinds of colliders. We're going to say private void on collision enter 2D, where the collider collision 2D other. Okay, so why is this like this? Because my bullet is a trigger, but my opossum is an actual object that it's going to connect with me. Now it's up to you how you do this. You can make everything a trigger, and you can give a trigger collider to the opossum as well. Should we reset when we lose life? Yeah, we will. We will. When we lose life and life goes to 0, then we're going to reset. But we're going to do a thing for that. Okay, so one thing at a time. So on collision, we're going to have two little colliders. One is the physical collider, this one, and one is the trigger collider, this one. So we're going to say that if other.gameObject.compareTag, and we're going to say any bullet hits us for now. Any bullet hits, then we're going to say that we're going to take damage. All right, so we're going to say take damage, and the bullet damage is going to be, well, it's going to give it a 10 value. All right, for now. Again, this is just a broad strokes thing. If we want a specific bullet, we can use, instead of compare tag, we can use name of the bullet. We can do a lot of stuff here. All right. But again, that's not the issue here. The other one is, what about if in here we're comparing tag to any enemy? If an enemy collides with us, then maybe the enemy can do more damage when they touch us. These kind of creatures in the forest, they like to rake us with their claws, and they probably can do more than spitting at us. Okay, so that's why we do it. In fact, you can make the bullet damage even lower. But 15 damage for when we get hit by the enemy, 10 damage is if we get hit by the bullet or something else. Okay, so that's kind of the way we're taking damage. And then we want to somehow show our life eventually. But let's see if we can just do this. Okay. And also if we fall. So if we fall and we hit a platform like this, then what we want is, instead of us respawning on the platform, we want us instead to lose a life. And we want to, when we lose a life, we want to spawn back to the spawn point. Right, we lose a life, go back to the spawn point. On the platform, on the death plane, we want to go back. We want to lose a life. Lose life. Right, so hit the death plane. Once we hit the death plane once, we lose a life, right? And we go back to here, right? Lose life, lose a life. We'll go back to that. Okay, and this is going to be, once we lose a life, we do a kind of a respawn. If, however, we have, this is only if and only if that we have a life to lose. But if we have less than, or only if we have, if lives are greater than 0, then we want to respawn. Otherwise, we don't. We want to go to the end screen. And that's what we're going to do here in the else statement. Else, we're going to go to the end screen. So go to the end scene. We don't have an end scene yet, but we will. Something like that. Okay. And if we lose a life, like Michael said, then we're going to reset our health. So if lives are greater than 0, then our health is going to be back to 100, in this case for the character. But we also have to set our value. So we're going to say health bar dot set value back to 100, right? So that's where it goes back to normal. Actually, we can just say health, just to keep it consistent. All right, health goes to 100. We reset their health. Otherwise, we'll go back. Make sense? That's your thing, Michael. All right, so we have a mechanism to lose life. We have a mechanism to take damage. We have to show losing life and stuff later on in the HUD, but we don't have that yet. And let's see how this all works. So going back to this, and let's just fall and see what happens. Well, first of all, let's take a look. We have 3 lives, and if I fall, we should be losing 1 life, but we lose 2. Why is that? Anyone have a reason why we would lose 2 lives and not 1? If we fall down, we can lose a life too, right? So why only 1? Why do we lose 2 lives there and not 1? So why do we lose 2? So if I fall again, then I'm at -1, and we don't respawn anymore, which is what's supposed to happen, right? So what happened? Why did we lose 2 lives every single time, not 1? Anybody have a theory on that? Okay, well, let's think about this for a second. If you enter the trigger twice, okay, so that's weird, right? Why should we enter the trigger twice? Why is that even a thing, right? And here's something. Do we want to do this? So the death plane, lose life, right? When we hit the death plane, we lose. When we fall, we lose a life, and then we come back. And if we're triggering on the death plane, that's what the thing that triggers us to come back, right? So that's the only thing that happens. So how is it that we hit twice? How do we hit that trigger twice? Trigger components on trigger. Are you talking about itself? Because if you look at the death plane, so that should be on the grid. So here's the death plane, right? So there's only a tile map collider 2D on the death plane, right? And so where is the trigger collider? Well, the trigger collider is on the player, right? Not on the death plane, right? The death plane only has a tile map collider 2D, right? Which it has to have. One thing to note is also, just to point out some stuff here, that you could also use on the on each of the platforms, you can use something called a different kind of collider we didn't talk about, which is if I go to tile map collider, the tile map collider is one thing, but there's also something called if I go to collider 2D, there's also called a composite collider, right? So if I want to say a composite collider 2D, a composite collider 2D will actually connect, and it'll create, it says geometry type is outlines, the generation type is synchronous, right? And what this will do is try and combine kind of all the colliders on a specific tile map, as an example, to one big collider, which makes sense a lot of times to save stuff. So if I said used by effector, no, but used by composite, yes. And when I do, it kind of creates one big collider, and that's for platforms. And I can do the same thing with a composite collider 2D for my other stuff too. So I can say used by composite, right? And the same thing goes with walls. I can add that in, composite collider 2D. I forgot to do this last time with you guys, used by composite. And then it creates kind of one big collider as opposed to the colliders that are there. All right. So it uses tile map and not X composite. So each one it hits counts as 2. Okay, which both activate the player trigger. Since each tile map collider is unique, set the gravity to 0. All right. So hold on a second. We'll do that in a second, and you can explain what you mean by that. First of all, let's see if my changes that I made just didn't break something. So that's bad. Look what happened there. The whole once I put in a composite collider 2D, it adds a rigid body, and that's what you meant. Platforms should have a gravity scale of 0, right? Same thing with ramps. They should have a gravity scale of 0. However, they do have a mass now, which is important. Walls, you can also make them static instead of dynamic, right? So for example, platforms should be really static, not dynamic, and the same thing goes with ramps. Again, it depends. I might have another layer of moving platforms as opposed to regular platforms, right? They wouldn't be static anymore. They'd be dynamic, but they wouldn't have any gravity, right? So now you can see that I don't care about gravity if they're static. That's the way to go with these, right? Death plane. Now this is another thing, right? So the death plane, I can add a Composite Collider 2D to the whole death plane. The death plane is also static, so it's not dynamic, right? And it's definitely going to use the composite for the death plane. So one big death plane. All right, lots of extra work, but let's see what that has the effect of doing. So far so good. The same kind of thing as before, but I'm still going to get this issue when I fall off, right? And if I look at the player, then I've lost, wait, what? I only lost 1 life. How'd that happen? How come I lost 2 lives before and I only lost 1 life this time? Well, because, my friends, what's happening is exactly what Michael said, right? Which is because each of the colliders on the death plane, there's multiple colliders to make up that big death plane, right? I'm actually probably hitting one and sliding and hitting another one. And that's why before I have any, or maybe hitting between 2. And this is the reason why this is happening. Okay, so this is kind of the way it is. All right, so that is that. The other thing that I want to talk about is now there's a separation. I don't know if you noticed that. Once I put that stuff in, I'm not sure if you noticed, but there is inside here, there is a separation. You can see the tiles, which kind of sucks. I don't like this separation stuff. So how do you change that? Well, there's some stuff we can do about anti-aliasing to help us. That's the one thing I read up about because I didn't like that whole thing. We're going to come back to this, and I'm not digressing. It's really part of this whole thing. So if I go back to graphics, as an example, what we want from a graphics perspective, right? And this is actually, or is it quality? I think it's quality. So right now you can see that we have, like truly, do we want ultra, as an example, when we're in, when we're running? Like there's really ultra, and that's the one we're on right now, right? I'm just, again, putting it on because if you look at the scale, so if I go to edit graphics tier, quality settings, where is it here? Not selection. Frame selected. Where the heck is it, guys? Maybe that's it. But yeah, graphics tier is 3, right? And maybe that's not what I want, for my mobile game, because remember we talked about optimizations. This might not be what I want at all. So let's go back to our preferences. Sorry, our project settings. So pixel light count is 4, right? Like there's some objects here we can probably change around. One of them is this anti-aliasing thing. And now there's a couple things to do. One to do is notice that it says Android, and we're looking at what's turned on as medium. So that is the medium quality where it's checked on. Allow quality setting on platform. All right. High and very high and ultra. I'm not sure that it doesn't allow for those things to be there anyway. So what we can do is, because we're running on an Android platform, if we're never going to make this game for a, as an example, for desktop or Mac or the web, as an example, then we want to remove some of this stuff, right? But I'm okay with what it's at. What I want is I want to modify the setting. So if I go to medium, which is this setting here, medium, then anti-aliasing should be disabled, and that's what causes some of that weird separation, right? Anti-aliasing. So that is pretty good. Texture quality is full resolution. We also may want to go in here and modify some of this eventually, and we can also look at some other settings here to help us out. But for now, I just wanted to check to see if that was an issue or not. It's not, so it's something else, but we're going to get back to it. All right, Cool. So that's that. Blah, blah, whatever. Let's go back out here. So we're looking like it's pretty good. It's working now. It's detecting lives lost, and it's detecting the right number of lives lost because we're using composite colliders, and we're not using every collider. It's not just one or individual. Sometimes we want individual colliders. Now, there's a side effect to what we've done. I got to also talk about the side effect. What about our the way we move now? That's kind of might be affecting the way we move. It might be better. It might be worse, right? So I'm just putting it out there. This looks pretty good. This looks much better than before. Take a look at that. Take a look how much better it is than it was before, right? Why? Because we had multiple colliders in here, guys, that cause us to have issues, and we don't have that problem anymore. It's one big collider, right? For this ramp. One big collider for this. One big collider for that. So much better in terms of performance. I think it's the way to go. All right, and it's trying to fire at us. That's a bad thing too. The fact that it can see us, it's trying to fire. Now I did. If I kind of do one of these, so I kind of want to move into that thing. Now it saw me, so I want to kind of go here. Let's go down the ramp. Woo! And let's. Oh yeah, that's also a problem. I don't know if you guys saw that. I lost a life there, right? So I went to 2 lives. So what happened there? Why was I able to? So I can't do this, but look what happens now. So I can go down, up. Okay, I'm just going to point this out. I can go to 0 lives now. This is 1 life. And if I go to 0 lives, I won't respawn. Let's see that? Now I'm just sitting there. I won't respawn. Because why? I don't want it to respawn. I want it to go to the next scene if we're here, right? This is good. All right. Now. Okay. Okay. And let's see if he hits me now. Do I take damage? Because the test, we haven't seen damage being taken. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, whoa. That was crazy. What happened? We went to like 0. We're at 55 health. And we're at 25 health. But my bar, well, that doesn't look right. So something's wrong with the bar. Bum, bum, bum. And we'll respawn. Because now we've lost all of our health. We've lost a life. We've gone back to here. The bar reset nicely. But what happened to the bar? How come it messed up like that? What do you think it could be? What did I miss? Look, I immediately went to red as soon as I took damage, and I got eaten by this guy. But now my health went to 90 somehow, and I got respawned. It's like the health carried over. I was getting damaged, and then somehow when I respawned, I had less than 10 health. Right, there he is. So this guy's going to go there forever. So that's a problem, guys. What happened? Let's take a look at the barcode. Floating point error. Yep. So let's go back to that thing that we were warned about. We were warned. It says the code said, "Hey there, if you do this, you're going to have some kind of error here." So what we need to do is, there's a couple ways. A lot of people, what they do is they cast this to double, actually. They cast this to a double, right? And they cast this to a double. When they do their precision, right? They do their precision division, right? And then what they do is they take the whole thing and rejig it as a float. So the whole thing. And you're seeing that, you can see that a lot in the Unity documentation when they do something that looks like this. So again, maybe this is overkill, but let's see how this looks now. So if you do this. So why? It needs to be a float, but I make it a double precision, I do my division, and then I convert I convert it back to a float. I chop off the extra digits that I don't need. If you want to be super accurate, that is definitely a way. I could have just converted it to floats too, and that would have been just fine. But a lot of times do this. Let's try that again. So again, I'm up here, and I'm up here, and I'm up here. And we made it this time. I'm getting better at playing this game, and I'm getting eaten. Now I'm getting eaten. You can see that the eating stuff is happening, and I've lost a little bit, but not the entire thing. And now I'm getting eaten by my bullets, and boom, I'm back over here. Pretty good. This is a great place to put it up on GitHub. I have functionality, but before I go there, I want to test it on my device. So I'm going to File, Save Project, File, Build and Run. And I want to build and run inside my builds folder. I'm going to call this Lab 9B. Let's build it and see what happens. Pretty good. Are you guys happy and unhappy? Would you do it differently? What are your feedback while I'm doing this, guys? What are your thoughts? Does the bar work the way you want it to? Would you use a slider instead? I've seen sliders being used. Slider control as opposed to this. What are your thoughts, guys? No thoughts. Yay! You guys agree? Yeah, okay. Good. You're doing it my way then. Yes, that's what I'm trying to make it so we're making our own custom slider in some ways, but it's also our own bar. We have a lot of control on what we can do it this way. In fact, we can do things like animation, where we animate. When we lose life, we don't lose life right away. It doesn't go, chop. It can be more of, we can make something bigger. We can send it to, a little animation. We can do a little animation where it kind of makes it fatter and bigger. It kind of shakes a little bit, comes back down, shrinks down to what it's supposed to be. The red disappears and just becomes black. Lots of stuff you can do, right? Like tons and tons of stuff. So there's like all kinds of really cool things that you can do for this thing to make it look nice. This is kind of like a first level slider, or a first level bar, if you will. All right, so let's see what this thing looks like in its crazy bigness, right? So, okay, we're cool, we're jumping, and we jump again, and we jump again, and, well, we almost made it. He fired a couple bullets at me, and we jump again, and let's see what happens. Is he going to eat me? He doesn't fire me. Oh, he's eating me, and that's not cool. And what happens if I fall? I fall off the edge, and boom, I got my health back, and I'm back to here, right? And I fall off the edge, and fall back to here, right? Full health. And I only have one life left, so I want to see myself stay at the bottom of that edge, which is going to simulate the fact that I'm going to, he's not going to move, right? Because right now he'd be going to the end, right? And he's going to be eaten. Yay, excellent. This is what I wanted. This is a great place to stop and go to clear all, sure. This is a great place to stop and put this to on GitHub. So again, I'm going to file, save. I'm going to file, save project. And we've accomplished one of our goals today, which is making our health bar and giving ability health to our ability. All right, so let's close this off and to our character. So git add dot git commit -m, and we're going to say added health bar to player. Git push. Okay, we go. All right, so that is good. It's good, and you should know how to do that for anything. We could add a health bar to destructible objects. We can add a health bar to enemies now. We can add a health bar to all kinds of stuff, right? But we have the ability to add a health bar. First, though, we're going to take care of the player. One thing at a time, always, is how I look at it. All right, let's get back into Unity again. So it's 1:20. We're going till about 3. Kind of stuff. Before we start something new, I think what we might want to do is let's stop recording so we have the health bar part, and then when we come back, let's take like 15 minutes, coffee break, all that kind of stuff. So we'll come back, let's say at 1:35, and when we come back at 1:35, we'll continue. What I want to do when we come back is in the HUD, or in the kind of on the canvas somewhere. And again, it may not have to be up here, but on the canvas, way over here, I want to add something that shows the character's life, right? Lives. So I can see if the character has lives at all. Okay, that's what I want to do for this. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll do the lives part, and we'll start getting into the other part of the level. Then we'll also do things like, how do I kill the enemy? Let's give the enemy a health bar too. And when we kill the enemy, you know, what happens to them? Do they respawn? Are they gone? You know, that kind of stuff. We need to kind of create all this magic for us so we can have multiple enemies throughout the entire level. Okay, so we'll come back. Let's take a short break. I'm going to stop recording right now, and we'll come back around, like I said, 1:35-ish. Okay.